Good afternoon. We are now today talking about Chapter 5, which delves into the approach of identifying customer problems as a source of new product concepts. So I want to start off with this chapter by talking about the process for how marketers go about doing this. So remember, we have a pick, so we've done some situation analysis, and we know something about our market and trends in the market and that kind of thing. So next, we need to try to start identifying some problems that consumers are having that we can solve and potentially create a product for that will be profitable and desired by customers. That's easy to say, not easy to do. In order to walk down that road, you have to figure out where to go look for those problems, and then you have to figure out how to get information from stakeholders that will help you understand what the problems are. Okay, so the output of that is that we have identified needs and problems, and then we need to screen them to determine which ones are the best fit for our company, which ones feed our product pipeline to our strategic advantage. And at that point, then we have a smaller subset of problems that we want to focus on solving. And we go ahead and try to figure out how to solve those problems. And from there, then we can actually create a product concept statement, which recall would identify at least two of the three elements of a product concept: form, technology, and the need or the benefit for customers. Okay, so that was pretty quick, but moving on, let's see here. Okay, so where do we look to identify problems? One obvious, well, maybe not so obvious place to look is inside your own company records. So let's say you're a company that manufactures tennis rackets. So you have records in your company about which models of tennis rackets have been selling, which ones have not been selling well. You know which products have been returned and for what reasons. Maybe they have a defective mesh in the racket. Maybe the handle's uncomfortable. Hopefully you've been collecting information on those returns about what was wrong with the product. So you can leverage all of that input. Maybe you're getting information from customer surveys as a company. So all of that information can be potentially very valuable to you in identifying problems. Of course, next, you've got people working in technical and marketing-related capacities in your company that are working with these products all the time, interfacing with customers and target markets. And so they should have some good direction for you about what's causing grief out there in the marketplace for consumers. Talk to them. Number 3, we can leverage a process called a problem analysis, and we can also talk about a scenario analysis. So we'll talk about those two in more depth here, moving along. So let's start with problem analysis. Problem analysis starts with a set of problems that you can analyze to figure out where you might have some new product concepts. So somewhere along the way, you've got a list of these potential problems in some sort of a database that you can look to or add to or maintain as a company. That's information that's important to you. So understand that problems are not the same thing as wants. They're handled differently. So you may want a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, but that is not a problem. There's not necessarily a problem with the peanut butter and jelly sandwich. It's a want is different from a problem. So I just need to make that point. You can also leverage experts in the field or published sources, or especially here, get after your stakeholders for the information they can give you. You've got to pin them down. In order to do that, that means you're interviewing them, maybe doing some focus groups, involving them in some analysis on the sorts of problems that they're having to get that information from them. So one method that's used for problem analysis is called reverse brainstorming procedure. And these are the 4 steps in the process. So first of all, you're identifying a product or an activity category. You need to find a group of users, heavy users, so they are knowledgeable about this area. And then you're asking them about, I'm scratching my nose, so I'm stopping talking. So then you are going to be asking this group of users what their problems are. And that's easy to say, not necessarily easy to do. So one way to get at their problems is to ask them what they would like to have out of a product versus what they actually get. And somewhere in the difference there, in the space between those, is a potential problem to be solved. So you'll read about that in Chapter 4. Finally here, once you have the set of problems, you need to prioritize them in some way. And so one way to do that is to use what's called the bothersome index, which requires you to consider the extent of the problem and the frequency that the problem occurs. And then you multiply those 2 factors to get an index rating for each of the problems. And then you can sort and rank the problems accordingly and know which ones are the biggest deal. Okay? All right. So enough about problem analysis. Now we'll look at scenario analysis. Scenario analysis is a situation where you're creating a scenario and you're looking at it, studying it to see if you can spot any potential needs. And then, of course, you would try to solve the needs. One point about scenario analysis is that it tends to work well for looking at situations where consumers don't really know they have a problem or they don't have a problem yet. It's something that'll happen down the road. So for example, I'm going to talk about the scenario forms. There's several different kinds here that marketers will work with. In one case, they'll extend the present situation. So, for example, you could look at a trend in the market towards consumers buying condos, which are smaller living quarters. And you can speculate then that if you've got more and more people moving into condos, that in 10 years' time, you're going to have a much larger population of people that don't have room in their homes for house guests. And so you can speculate that the need for hotels may be increasing over the next 10 plus years. That would be a case where you see a trend in the market and you extend that trend into the future. So the next example of a scenario form is called leaping to the future. So you can either leap to the future in a dynamic way or in a static way. So if you're going to leap dynamically, then you are considering all of the stages in the process in time between the present date and 10 years down the road, and working your way to a position where you can see a need in the future that doesn't exist now. This is different from a static leap where you don't really care what happens in the time interim. You're just leaping to the future and speculating something that you think will happen then. And that's a little different from a wild card scenario. These are situations that tend to be high impact, but they're probably not going to happen. They're low probability. For example, maybe one of the cases in the book that was mentioned was maybe in the future we are cloning human beings. And so if we're cloning people, that's a completely different market situation than we have now, with completely different scenarios of potential new products that might come along with that. So that's an example of a wild card analysis. After you have your set of problems and you have analyzed them, you've chosen the ones you want to focus on, now you're going to try to figure out how to solve them. So you've got some sort of a group of people, a team that's going to be, typically it's a team, a group effort, that's going to be involved in addressing a potential problem to be solved. This approach does not work as well if you've got some kind of a new to the world or some kind of a radical solution. In those cases, an individual sort of approach to solving the problem seems to work better. But if that is not the case, group methods of problem solving tend to work well. So I've just kind of listed the main ones here that marketers are using: brainstorming, electronic brainstorming, leveraging online communities, and then a disciplines panel, which is a group of experts that you would call together. Brainstorming is a technique that's almost commonplace anymore. We just talk about brainstorming like it's every day many times. But there are some good management rules to making that technique work, to keeping it at a positive process. And I've kind of mentioned some of those here. The bazooka effect can happen if you're not staying positive in the process, and if you start to see people shooting down ideas, we don't want that. Brain sketching, speed storming, know something about those. One of the downsides of brainstorming is that you've got a group of people and everybody doesn't necessarily have to participate. You can have laggards in the process, or you can have personal friction things happening there. So electronic brainstorming takes some of that out, or eliminates those issues, and makes the input from the group more anonymous. And it's supported oftentimes, or generally, by software that just assists in displaying all of everybody's input and keeping the ball rolling in the brainstorming session. All right, so that is all I'm going to say today about Chapter 5. And we will just keep going down the process for new product development in the next chapter. So I'll see you then. Have a good rest of your week. Bye-bye.